But Jamie Gilbert's here today to speak with us and tell us all the goings on in the county and what's new and what's exciting. I'm sure he's got a great program planned for us today. So everybody put your hands together for Jamie Gilbert.
This is always one of my favorite organizations to come out and speak to. I'll tell you that keeping something brief is not one of my best traits, but I'm going to try to put all this into to 30 minutes. And I want to walk you through a couple of different areas today. I want to talk to you a little bit about what economic development actually is, what we do, what we don't do, highlight some of the projects that we've worked on in the last year that have been successful here in Paulding. Also, kind of the difference between what we do and what the Industrial Building Authority does, and then where we're going hopefully in 2014 and beyond. But before I get started, the one thing that I found here being in Paulding for the last 3 years is that I always thought, being a Yankee and from being from Baltimore, that this was going to be the one thing that was going to be a tough sell for folks down here. But according to David Austin, the tough sell for me is being a Clemson guy, being the big Georgia fan that he is. But I have to keep reminding David that even though he loves Georgia, he did pick, in terms of the folks that are developing and planning this community, he does have a community development director who is a Clemson grad, and we have an economic development director that's a Clemson grad. And I think that happened because we really do know what God's country is supposed to look like. Let me get started by first kind of giving you an overview of what this work. Okay. What is economic development? I'll give you the best definition of it. It comes from the International Economic Development Council. It's really about new jobs, it's about new investment, and it's about improving the overall quality of life in a community. And there are a number of ways that this can be accomplished. According to IEDC, there's really 3 areas that we impact. Most of this has to do with policies and programs. One is looking at how the government undertakes initiatives to be broad economic objectives. Those economic objectives are creating jobs, lowering unemployment, bringing new investment into the community, what you see in the first 3 on the top bullet. But it's also providing services that allow for business growth. And so whether it's the Department of Transportation creating the East Iron Parkway and building that, whether it's improvements to water and sewer lines and extending it out to areas which could accommodate business development. Those are all policies and programs that help generate the wealth and the jobs in the community. And then there's also what we call just the general policy and program that an economic development organization undertakes, whether that's marketing the community, working with existing industry, neighborhood development, business retention, etc. The competition for jobs and investment is a very competitive game. What is amazing is that a lot of folks they hear these announcements, whether it's projects like Airbus going to Mobile, Alabama, whether it's Caterpillar going up over to Athens, and they hear about these great projects coming to communities, but what goes into getting those projects there is really the untold story. And the competition that exists not only between states, but also between communities within those states. So when you hear these projects that are high-profile ones, like the Kias, like the Boeings, there's a 6 to 18-month process that is usually taking place before those projects land. And even for projects that don't necessarily make the national headlines, like some of the ones we've had here, like Interroll and Rocky and Certified DEF, those projects are extremely competitive between Paulding County and our neighboring counties. What is also, I think, pretty amazing about economic development is that it does cross all political parties. So you'll find that Democrats and Republicans both support the idea of creating jobs and bringing new investment to communities. In fact, you hear sometimes, well, maybe Republicans really aren't in favor of doing the things as far as incentives and other initiatives that would bring those businesses to the community. Well, if you look at the top states for economic development, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Louisiana, those are led by very strong Republican governors who take extremely active roles in the recruitment of business. So it does span both political parties. And in fact, you're also seeing that in some states that are traditional Democrat states, like New York and Michigan, they're doing things to improve the business climate to make their states more attractive for business. Some states are opting to now become right-to-work states in traditionally heavily union areas of the country. You're also seeing New York tell business, you probably have seen the commercials, no taxes for 10 years. So it is a very competitive game. There are certain things that economic development does, and there are other things that we don't do. And I think some clarification on that is important. Economic development does not create jobs. So, we do not create jobs. Only the private sector can create jobs. But what economic development does is facilitate those new jobs that are going to be created by the private sector. And that is what every state and community is competing for, to get those private sector jobs to locate in their community. We do diversify the tax base. By bringing in industry, we relieve the burden that would fall on residential development and homeowners to pay for all of the services in a community. Now, when we talk about incentives a little bit later, there is a certain period of time in which, when we do tax abatements, that revenue is not coming in. But there's also the adage, do you want 100% of nothing, or do you want 20 or 30% of something? And the idea for us is that economic development is not a 1-year window, a 5-year window. This is about where we're going to be in 20 years in terms of our business community and the types of industries we have here. So there's a short-term offset that we take in exchange for having those jobs and those companies here and the benefit it will result in for the community in the long run. We set the table for businesses to come in to the community. And how do we set the table and how do we facilitate those projects coming in? We help companies with site and building identification and development of properties and where they can construct their facilities. We also work and encourage infrastructure improvements, whether those are the county-owned sites or whether it's DOT constructing something like the East Hiram Parkway. The East Hiram Parkway is a great example of infrastructure improvement that will benefit Paulding County tremendously in terms of recruitment of industrial companies to this community by bypassing the very heavily traveled 278 retail area of the county. We also work to create incentive programs that will assist companies in offsetting the cost of their projects. We get involved in workforce recruitment and development, whether that's with Chattahoochee Tech, whether it's helping companies promote the job opportunities that they have available through social media. We become heavily involved in working to make sure that these companies that are looking here know about the workforce and how they can train the workforce for what they want to do. There's also what we call business resource identification. A company that's looking to locate or expand in a community definitely wants to know that the supplier network is there for what they need to do to be successful. And we'll talk about that a little bit later with the Rocky project, that in order to grow the business here like they have grown in Italy, they need to find a very reliable supplier network. And then lastly, ensuring that we have an optimal business climate, whether that's what our millage rate is, whether it's our permitting process, whether it's our water and sewer connection fees. All of those things are important to creating a good business climate that encourages businesses to come to the community. Paulding County Economic Development, what are we as an organization? Well, we turned 3 back in March, and we were launched back on March, I believe, the 20th of 2011. We are a public-private partnership. It's important to understand that when this organization was created, there was a group of 100 business and community leaders that worked on establishing our organization. And the decision was made at the time that it shouldn't be part of Paulding County government. It shouldn't be part of the Industrial Building Authority. It shouldn't be part of the Chamber of Commerce, and it certainly wouldn't be part of any of the cities since it was representing county-wide development. So the decision was made to create a public-private partnership that would work for all of those entities but would be independent of those organizations. So our funding comes from all of those groups that I mentioned, with the exception of the Industrial Building Authority. They don't provide any funding to us. The county, the two cities, and the chamber do that. We have a 9-member board. The funding organizations provide 2 appointments to that board. The IBA gets 1 appointment. So that's how we have the 9-member board. And you can see we did have 9 members before Herb Haynes decided to run for post 3. And we have a provision that says you can't be a candidate for office and also serve on our board. We're trying to keep this organization free of politics. So what are our goals and objectives? And it's pretty clear. I mean, it's the idea again, jobs and investment. Those are the 2 major goals, but we could break those down into very specific goals that we have for us. One was to create a strong and recognizable brand for Paulding County. When I went around the state to our allies at, say, Georgia Department of Economic Development or at Georgia Power or Georgia MC to talk about Paulding County as a place for business, it was pretty evident that there was the only perception that Paulding County had was as a bedroom community to Atlanta and Marietta. I mean, that's evident by the growth we've had and also the number of people that work in those communities. But it was not considered a location for industrial companies. In fact, the state project managers at the Department of Economic Development would tell me that there were many occasions that they would bring projects and prospects up to visit Rockmart and Cedartown, and they would drive right through Paulding County. They did not know who to go to. They did not know that Paulding County was open for business. Again, that's the reason why Paulding County Economic Development was created. But the idea was to create a brand. And we started with our tagline, which you will see on everything, which is the destination Paulding, arrival time now. And for us, that has a couple meanings. And that is a tagline that, it's funny, that tagline was actually created when I interviewed for the job. And I was a finalist for it, and the group that interviewed me said, what would you do for Paulding County? And I said, well, we need to build around a brand and identity. And this is what I have in mind, this destination Paulding, arrival time now. That started out just because at the time, the real emphasis was 2 in terms of industry. There was the airport to work with, and there was the new hospital that was going to be constructed. So you do see a little bit of like an aerospace connection in that destination Paulding, arrival time now, but that's not why we chose that line. I chose that line because for us, we wanted businesses to be thinking of Paulding County as a premier location or destination for their companies, to set up operations here. And the arrival time now not only means that they need to be in Paulding doing business and have their facilities here, but it also means that our time as an economic development player has arrived. And so it has a couple of dual meanings. We wanted to develop the reputation. I love this. This is what I call kind of like the Boy Scout motto. But we wanted to develop a reputation where we were recognized as being a pro-business community that was prepared for when prospects came here and looked, that we were determined, we were unified with what we did, that we were knowledgeable about this community and what the clients wanted, and to be able to deliver on that. Responsive, meaning if they come to us, doesn't matter, 24/7, and some of you folks that have worked with me and know from the emails you get and the phone calls, that's how I operate. We are a 24/7 operation. If someone calls from the West Coast and it's 8 o'clock at night, they're going to get a phone call back from me, or I'm going to pick up the phone. So we're responsive. We're also resourceful and dependable. They know, and this is really what we're seeing with Georgia Department of Economic Development and the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce team. They know that they can bring projects to Paulding County, and we are going to, the dependability, we're going to fill out all the RFPs they send us correctly. We're going to go the extra mile to provide them with everything they need to make a good impression to their clients. And we're tenacious, and we've been successful. So we've accomplished the first 2 goals. Creating high-paying jobs. We're not talking about just bringing any jobs into Paulding County. We want jobs that are at least at the current salary for jobs that exist in Paulding County or above that. And with all the companies that we have brought in the last 3 years, they have met that criteria. We want to be recognized as the place to do business in Northwest Georgia, especially for manufacturers and Metro Atlanta. Again, if you talk to any of the folks at the Metro Atlanta Chamber or Georgia Department of Economic Development, we've hit that goal. Now, we may not have a lot of industry here at the present time, but we're developing the reputation that the ones that come here are going to be very successful. So that's still a long-term strategy for us within 5 years, but I think we're getting there. And we are one of the preferred business locations right now in Georgia. We're seeing a lot of activity and projects being brought to us from our allies across the state. Transitioning from a bedroom community to an employment center in the next 10 to 15 years, this is one of our goals. I'm not sure we're going to hit that goal. It's extraordinarily difficult. With the population growth in Paulding County, I don't think there's any way really feasible for us to create enough jobs to reverse that trend. But what we can do is start looking at individual sectors, whether it be manufacturing or healthcare, and start to see those numbers increase in terms of the employment we have in them. So one of the goals for us is going to be to bring in more companies with 10 or more employees. And the reason we're saying 10 or more is because those companies generally spend more money in the community. So this is not a knock against small business, but when it comes to manufacturing, those companies that have the 10 or more employees are going to be spending a lot of money in our community. We want that to happen. And then finally, we want to see manufacturing employment increase by 70%. When I started here, I think we had about 800 individuals employed in manufacturing. So to get to that 70% increase number, we want to see that by 2016 that we've created at least 560 more jobs. And we have some of those jobs coming in. There's some big projects looking at Paulding County right now that could almost overnight have us hit that number. But those are our goals. So this is kind of repetitive. We talked a little bit earlier about what economic development does in terms of trying to facilitate projects. But these are the actual activities and services provided by Paulding County Economic Development. It is everything from marketing to completing the request for information that we get from our allies. It's trying to identify sites and buildings and help develop the industrial parks, especially the ones the Industrial Building Authority owns and maintains. We will provide all kinds of data and demographic reports when asked. And again, permitting and development, when companies come in, they want to be sure that they can have a quick permit process. So we stay on top of county and city departments to make sure that that is done. So what are some of the success stories we've had from the work that we've been doing? In the last year, the Interroll Atlanta Center of Excellence is our highest profile project. We actually had the grand opening for that back on March the 16th. It was attended by hundreds of their suppliers and customers from around the world, and it was a great event. This facility has truly put Paulding County on the map. It's the first project we've had at the Paulding Commerce Park. When we announced the project in 2012, we said there's absolutely nothing like this in Paulding County. And when you see this facility, that has held true. And every project destined for that park, if it comes here, will have to meet the design guidelines that you see for a facility like Interroll. It is a Class A manufacturing campus designed specifically to bring international companies and Fortune 500 firms to Paulding County. This facility has already exceeded the expectations of Interroll. It's not just a manufacturing facility for conveyors, but it's a showroom facility where they will be bringing in customers from all over North America to see how these conveyors are manufactured and then to actually see them in a working environment. The facility was completed in November of 2013. They spent probably the next month working to hire their professionals, managerial positions at the facility, and then they got to work on bringing in the manufacturing types of jobs, whether it be assembler, welders, metal fabrication folks, and they've been ecstatic. What you don't see here is the sheer number of inquiries they've had and applicants for positions there. For manufacturing jobs, for every job that has been opened there, they have had 7 applicants. You contact them either directly completing applications or sending resumes. Van Saunders, who is the plant manager there, worked at Hahn up in like Cedartown or Rockmore, I'm not sure which. But he said that for them up in Polk County, they were lucky to get one applicant per job. Here, they can't keep up with the number of inquirers they have, and it's not just people that just are inquiring that aren't qualified. They told us for every 7 that they get, they could hire most of those folks, and it's a tough decision for them to see who they want to select for these positions. And the other good news is most of these jobs are being filled by people that live in Paulding County. 70% of the folks that they have hired are residents of Paulding County that are working in other communities. So we're keeping them here in Paulding County, they're spending their money locally, and we're not having that leakage of sales tax going outside the county every day. But this project has more value in Paulding County than what I even anticipated. I knew it would do a lot to generate interest in Paulding, but as we bring projects through the park and they see this facility and they tour this facility, they're hearing how great of a location Paulding is for business and what we're capable of doing. The other project is Rocky America, which is an Italian company that makes bottling machinery. They have located their U.S. headquarters here in the Sunnyland Industrial Park here in Hiram. They relocated it from New Jersey back in July of last year, and the goal for them is to manufacture 100% of these machines right in Paulding County. I've been to their facility in Italy, which has about 200 employees. 50% of those machines made at that facility are coming to the U.S. That's how big of a market this is. And when you think about the time to ship and the cost of shipping, that's why they wanted to find a location where they could manufacture eventually 100% of those machines here. So we're extremely ecstatic about that. They're starting off small, but they are one of the biggest proponents and advocates for business coming to Paulding County. We can have companies that we're working with talk to them anytime about the service that they've gotten from Paulding County economic development in this community, and that really goes a long way in convincing other industries like them that this is the place that they need to be. There's an interesting trend that's developing. It's what I call the Paulding corporate loop. It really is its own business center, and it's defined by the intersection there at the hospital of Bill Caruth Parkway and 278. It extends south down to the East Hiram Parkway, and then out northeast to back to 278, and then northwest up the 278 retail area. This whole area functions as a location for business. So everything's in there, whether it's the medical care from the hospital, whether it's the Paulding Commerce Park, or whether it's the retail services, hotels and restaurants that are there to support the companies that are coming in. So I'll walk you through a couple of the highlights. Obviously, you all know about Wellstar. This is not one of Paulding County Economic Development's project, but it's important to what we do. When folks come into Paulding County, this is the first impression they get of Paulding, and it's an outstanding one. They see a modern medical campus that has been built in which a company of Wellstar's caliber has opted to make an investment of this size in this community, and it's a long-term investment. So this really goes a long way in helping Paulding County establish an image to especially international companies that this is a county that they want to invest in. Paulding Commerce Park, and I'll tell you the story about this in interroll because it's a funny one. I don't know many communities that can take a former spray field and make it into something profitable. That's what we're seeing here. We've changed what was considered a negative use and made it into something extremely positive. I remember a couple funny stories with this. I remember the first time that I floated this idea by Tommy Graham that we need to make this more than just a traditional industrial park because we didn't have a site that looked this way, that international companies would want to come to. And Tommy in his way would say, Jamie, this ain't Cobb County. We don't need those kind of locations. I said, Tommy, trust me. We need one of these locations, if not more, because I think we will see companies that want to be here find this piece of property attractive. He said, okay, trust you on that. Go ahead and market it that way. And fortunately for us, a couple months later, Interroll arrived and looked, and it was the perfect site for them. the other funny story about Interroll is we knew that this site, with what they were looking for, because they had looked all around Metro, they had not looked in Paulding County because they knew that we did not have the sites or the buildings at the time that they started their search. So through some different connections, we got wind of the project, and we met with the president of U.S. Operations, who happened to be in Paulding for a trade show, the Modex show in Atlanta back in 2012. So we kind of knew that this site would work for the image and feel that they wanted. We spent the morning with Tim McGill and with Colin Brown, who was their site consultant that they were using, who used to be with the BMW Metal Products, which Interroll had bought a couple of years earlier here in Paulding. And so they were using him to be the site consultant. So Blake Swafford and I met with them in the morning, and we presented what Paulding County could do for the project and what site we thought would be ideal. So I said to them, do you want me to go out with you and look at this site or any other sites? And they said, no, we'll do it on our own. So I got a call back about 5:30 that afternoon from Colin, who said, well, we looked at several of the sites, and you're definitely right. The site that's going to work for us is Paulding Commerce Park. And he said, Tim has looked at a lot of sites in Metro Atlanta, and he's just ecstatic about this one. And so Colin starts laughing, and I said, well, what's so funny? Because Colin, being from around here, knew this site used to be a spray field. Now, we didn't say anything about it being a spray field because we didn't want to bias or have them eliminate it right away. We knew the site was clean, but we just didn't want to give a negative impression of it. And he starts laughing and said, well, Tim said to him, I've looked at a lot of sites in Metro Atlanta, and this site is great. And he said, what I like about it the best is there's not a lot of crap around it. Little did he know. So, the rest...
I didn't know it was spray field, but I do now.
Yeah. So we knew with the site being clean that we could show and demonstrate that it was a good location. And so the rest is history. And as we bring other projects in and we tell them, yeah, this used to be a spray field, the fact that Interroll is here and we have all the reports showing it's clean, it's a moot point. It doesn't matter. But it shows exceptionally well. The thing about this park, it has great access to everything. It has great access to I-20, to Hartsfield-Jackson, to the intermodal facility in Austell. In fact, Interroll is now shipping products from Canada down here to be finished. So they're using the intermodal facility. It is a Class A manufacturing campus. It has protective covenants in place to ensure that all future development is exactly like what we see with Interroll. And the fact that it is owned by the Industrial Building Authority gives us some flexibility in terms of pricing, which is great in competing with other sites in Metro. I want to show you something right quick, and Robert, how do I do this? Before we go in, this is something that Croy Engineering did for us, and we use it as a way to show to prospects what's possible at the park. We think there are probably 8 sites altogether, the 2 front parcels. You have Interroll, which will be a third, and we think, depending on the size, we may be able to put 5 more uses back there. If they're big uses, like the one you're going to see in this picture, you probably end up with 2 more sites back there. But this gives an example of what the park is capable of having. This has been engineered, not completely engineered, but done by an engineering firm. They looked at what it costs to cut and grade the site. So we have all the information we need if somebody ever walks in that needs a facility this size. And again, we're after manufacturing projects. We're not after distribution. So this would be for a manufacturing project, and this is how we're going to market it. So Robert, you want to start the video? This is really cool. It really makes the site come alive. We can send them PDFs of the site, maps, aerial photos. This walkthrough really is impressive. So there's the Interroll building to the south. This piece back here could accommodate a building from 100,000 up to 500,000 square feet. And what's important is you have to have these types of materials to show prospects what you're capable of doing at a site like this. Information is key, and they don't want to wait weeks and weeks to get the information they need to evaluate the property. I think there's just one more little fly through that happens, and then we'll be done with it. But the look and feel, the CEO came over from Switzerland for Interroll and stood out on the hill just looking down on that pond and said, this is where I want to be. And we're doing some work right now. We got the entrance sign put in a few weeks ago. We're having some landscaping plans be developed, and we're going to master plan this site as well, because currently there's not a master plan for it. But we need that information, so that's what we're working on in the next few weeks. I think that's it, Robert. One of the other emerging trends that we're seeing is that our best recruiters now are our existing industry. What you see in all these pictures here, this sign right here, Ronke allowed us to put that at their booth at the Packaging Expo show in Las Vegas. They allowed us to have our marketing materials there to promote Paulding County. They believe in what we're doing, and so they're willing to tell that story. You see on the right-hand side, top right, Simmons Engineering allowed us to do the same thing at the Poultry Expo. There we are with the executives. These two gentlemen here are part of the Ronke. It's a family-owned business, so that's the son and the brother of the founder. Both sons, I guess. But those are the sons that run the operation from Italy. And then over here you have the Interroll team. And that's Paul Zabula, who is the CEO from Switzerland. They allowed us also to have our signage and literature there. And then you see the Paulding Aerospace Alliance, and you have information in your pocket folder on that. But that's an organization that helps us market Paulding County to the aerospace community. So I'm not going to read this quote. You can see it, but this is what we want every single business that we work with saying about Paulding County. And we feel comfortable when prospects look at this county, taking them to meet with existing industry and to hear the stories of how we've worked with them to make their operation be successful in terms of getting up and running. So how do we do this, and what kind of incentives do we have available? This is the toolbox that we have. I will say that all of our incentives, whether they are tax abatements, whether they are grants, are performance-based. And what I mean by that is you have to create the jobs to receive and retain the incentives that are offered. So if you get a property tax abatement, you have to maintain those jobs in order to receive the abatement that you've been awarded. If you're getting a grant from us, the same thing. You have to create the jobs. If you don't, there's a payback penalty to us. So we have the property tax abatements that we use. They're guidelines. It's not a structured policy, but we use it every time. And we look at job creation, the wages paid for those jobs, and the investment. And that's the capital investments, the private investment the business is making in the facility in terms of the building and the equipment. I would say that on property tax abatements, because of the legal fees that the companies have to pay, there really is a minimum number to qualify. I wouldn't say to qualify, but to make it so that it's beneficial to them, you probably need to have at least a $2 million investment to make it attractive. Otherwise, you'll never offset the legal fees that are involved. And those aren't our fees. Those are fees that are paid to attorneys that they bring in to do this bond for title process. And that's the other thing I want to mention. The bond for title process in Georgia, you'll hear that term sometimes. It's the way the state of Georgia set up legally to be able to do tax abatements for companies. You can't grant under the gratuity clause an abatement or to give a company money. There has to be some type of consideration. Consideration is the jobs and the investment. So The way this works, it's a very convoluted process, and I'm not even going to try to explain it because I had difficulty explaining it, but it's the way it legally works in every community in Georgia. Basically, a public authority, in this case the Industrial Building Authority, holds title to the land, the building, and the equipment, or whatever is receiving the abatement, and they lease it to the company. And they don't own the building, technically. They haven't financed the building. There's no financial obligation on their part. The abatement can be, basically, the obligation of leasing it to a company can go away anytime that the company wants, and the property just goes right back to them in title. So you'll see when people say, oh, you did bonds to finance Interroll. No, we didn't do any bonds to finance Interroll. There was no financial obligation on the part of the county or the Industrial Building Authority in terms of that building or equipment. They're only holding title to it, and it's being technically leased to the company in order to receive the abatement. County-owned industrial sites like Paulding Commerce Park allows us to be competitive with projects that are looking in metro area in terms of pricing. We will take a look for substantial projects at reduction and waiver of building permit fees. Those are minimal fees, so there really is not much of an issue. And to some companies it's beneficial, others not so much. We also try to do the fast track permitting, which means if you turn in your plans and they're done according to what the county needs, then a building permit could be issued in 5 to 10 days. But again, that has to be a substantial project in terms of jobs and investment to get moved up to that priority status. We also exempt 100% of inventory for manufacturing companies. And there's also tax-exempt taxable bond financing that's available. That's passed through the Industrial Building Authority. It's not them financing the project. It's a tax-exempt status that's granted. And then Paulding County Economic Development, we thought that it would be good to have some small grant monies available to assist companies, whether it's with facility construction, moving costs, things like that. We've only given 2 of those grants to date. One was to Interroll and one was to Envelope Superstore. So we still have that money, and we have it available to assist companies, but it's generally in the $5,000 to $10,000 range is what we're looking at. So let's talk about kind of how incentives work for 2 projects. And I'm not necessarily getting to the details of the total amount of monetary incentives that were there, but I'll walk you through what they received. And this shows you how different projects can be. You have on one hand Interroll, which we based our incentives on 90 new jobs. They're at 60. They will hit more than likely the 100 job number probably either later this year or by the end of 2015. And it was an investment of $11 million that was projected. Rocky was 35 new jobs and a capital investment of $1.4 million. Rocky, because of the investment number and because they weren't in an opportunity zone, we worked with them in other ways. We helped them find the sites, we helped them with signage, we helped them with permitting, and you'll see that a little bit later. But the point is, not all companies coming in require incentives, but they require somebody that can help them get located in the community. They were looking down in Cobb County. Without us getting involved, they'd probably be down in Florence Road right now and building their facility and their business down there. Interroll, on the other hand, the extremely competitive project, looking at Fulton and Douglas County, and looking at North Carolina, Indiana, and Toronto for the facility. So very competitive. So we offered them a tax abatement. We arranged for them to have land at the park, an economic development grant, the opportunity zone tax credits, which are the $3,500 per job credit. Now figure on a 100 job operation, that's $350,000 annually for 5 years. $1.75 million. That is a significant amount of tax credits. Those credits are available to small businesses too in existing industry, provided they create at least 2 new jobs. So those are state incentives. Now, what we did before we did anything as far as approving these incentives for the project, we went to Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech has a fiscal impact program that they built to be used by communities across Georgia and around the country. It is a very conservative analysis because it only looks at revenues that are going to be generated in terms of tax revenues and business permits, business licenses, building permits, things like that. And then it measures against the cost of what it's expected in terms of services. So when they ran the loci analysis for us, for Interroll, and they took the incentives we were offering and then looked at the project without incentives, over a 12-year period, without any incentives, And again, a very conservative number. This is not an economic impact analysis. It's a fiscal, very different. Economic impact analysis generally have much, much higher numbers because of what they take into account. The project was expected to generate $1,579,111 in net present value over 12 years. With the incentives, there's still a net benefit to us of $609,978 over the 12-year period. It's a win-win for us. Considering that this is a site that was not generating any revenue at all, this is huge. Now, one of the things that always comes up is kind of not understanding what Paulding County economic development is. Folks don't understand, are we a county department? No, we're not part of the county. Again, we're a public-private partnership that is independent of the county. Are we part of the Industrial Building Authority? No, we're not part of the Industrial Building Authority, and we're not part of the Chamber. We work with all of those groups to help bring business to Paulding County. So I'm not going to run through all this again, but what we do is we do all of the marketing of Paulding to new and expanding business prospects. We're that first point of contact, whether it's going to trade shows, whether it's the calls that we get. If the IBA gets a call, they send it to us. If the Chamber gets a call, they send it to us. We're that point of contact. We do all the RFP work and send that out to the prospects, whether it's Georgia Department of Economic Development or Georgia Power. When the companies come to visit, we plan, coordinate, and execute the whole day or days that they're here in Paulding and arrange for them to get the things that they need in terms of whether it's interviewing companies or talking to different departments. That's what we do. We also are the ones that create the incentives for the project. We will put together what's called an incentive proposal, and we will say to the company, this is what we're recommending. Understand it's subject to the approval of certain departments and entities, but this is what we would like to do for the project. And then at some point, it's up to us to then go to those entities, and we have an idea already before we ever offer it to the company that we think that these are arrangements or incentives that would be supported. But at the end of the day, we have to make those requests to be officially approved when the time is right. And of course, we maintain the grant program that we have that's in our budget. And again, we will recommend to the IBA site improvements. If there's studies that are needed to show what the soil conditions are for a prospect, we'll go and we'll help facilitate that. We'll push them to get those things done. Infrastructure improvements, the same thing. And then once all that is done and the company has agreed to come here, we have to monitor and stay on top of everything to make sure the commitments, whether it's county assistance, department assistance, if it's things that the state has promised, we have to be active, involved, and working to make sure that our promises we made to the company are kept. What we do not do, we do not approve the tax abatements. We do not have the authority. Again, in Georgia, the bond for title process means an entity like a development authority is the only one that can do that. So we make the recommendations, they have to approve it, and then it's their responsibility to basically monitor it from year to year. We do not provide financing for projects beyond the grant money that we have, again, which is usually a $5,000 to $10,000 grant. We do not make improvements to the land. The IBA owns the land. We can suggest to them that they need to do certain improvements there, whether it's landscape improvements, signage improvements. At the end of the day, they have to enter into those contracts, and they're the ones that provide the financing to get it done. And also things like if we're going to select an industrial broker to represent the property, we can find those brokers, bring them to the table. At the end of the day, that contract is between the IBA and the broker or the developer. What does the Industrial Building Authority do to help with economic development? Well, again, they support our business recruitment efforts. They're part of the team that's there to help get the project done. Again, whether it's the site or it's the incentives in terms of the tax abatements. They own the commercial industrial properties. A large majority of the properties we're marketing are IBA-owned properties, Paulding Commerce Park, Dallas Industrial Park, or the Airport Technology Park. They're responsible for all the planning, the development, the building, and infrastructure improvements on their properties. We can't do anything but encourage at that point. And they have the ability to construct speculative buildings if they choose to do that, or if they want to do a build-to-suit. In other words, a company comes in and says, hey, I want to lease a building for 5 years. They have the ability to go and construct a building and lease it to the company. We don't have that ability to do that. And again, they approve all tax abatements for new and expanding businesses. as stipulated by Georgia law. And give you an example of a couple projects. This shows you kind of the team approach and what we do and what they do. On the Interroll project, we managed the whole marketing and recruitment effort from the first meeting to the grand opening, put the incentives together, and then took those incentives to the different entities and said, hey, this is what we need to get the project done. At the end of the day, they approved the incentives, except for the grant that we offered them. Coordinate the project announcement, making sure our obligations are met. And so you can see we've kind of covered some of this already. But at the end of the day, we can't finance, we can't own the real estate or title it, we can't grant the abatements. Rocky, again, very little that was needed by the IBA in this, so they really had no role in that one. We did the building search, we helped them find sign companies that could put up the signage on their building. We helped them get the sign permit with the city of Hiram, the building permits with the county, and have done things like finding employees as well as helping them with spousal employment. The one gentleman had a wife who was from Italy and wanted to see if we could help find a job for her here in Metro. And then we helped identify the suppliers, because I mentioned earlier, with Rocky, they need to have suppliers in order to grow the business here. They have relationships with suppliers in Italy that go back 40 years that they can depend on. They're coming into this market not knowing any suppliers. They don't know who provides metal fabrication work, who could do machining work. So instead of these machines coming over 90% finished, where they finish off the other 10%, they need to have a reliable network of suppliers to help them build these machines here. The film studio, the only thing we really do on that, because the IBA owns this and they have a contract with Roadtown Enterprises. Roadtown Enterprises is who they've contracted with to get television and film productions at the studio. Our role is a support role when we're asked. If they need to find a site in Paulding County that can work for some type of production, whether it's a house that they want to use to shoot at that has a certain look or feel, if it's a lot that they need, if it's in the warehouse building, whatever, we may be called on to help find a location that could work. But we don't get involved actively in trying to recruit productions to the studio. We do get actively involved, again, when asked, if there's a supplier like DAGS, which does the film support units, which is located in Dallas Industrial Park. If they need a location, we will help find a location or a building for them. And the IBA is at the end of the day, they plan the facility, they own the facility, and they manage it through Roadtown Enterprises. What is our rollout at the airport? At the airport, we're specifically focused on trying to bring in MRO facilities, which stands for Maintenance, Repair, and Overhaul. These are companies that would do repair work to planes, that would need hangar facilities and things of that nature. We also work on aircraft assembly companies. If a company like a Bombardier or Dassault is looking for a location to build corporate jets, then and Paulding is in the mix, we're going to work with the state or whoever to put some type of proposal together to try to make that happen. We will work with Propeller Investments to do the same thing, but it's on that MRO and that aircraft assembly side. We don't have a financial investment in the airport since we don't own any of the facilities. We don't work on runways. We don't run on taxiways. We can tell the folks at the IBA or the Airport Authority or Propeller Investments that we need to extend a runway in order to accommodate a project that would come here. But again, that's not what we do. We don't have the authority to do any of that. And we have taken a policy, since we're non-political, that we're neutral on the commercial air service. So we're not for, we're not against, we just are neutral on that one. And instead it's turned into a political issue. So we are neutral on that. And the IBA works with us, again, on all of those projects, with the exception, again, commercial service, because we're not out trying to recruit airlines or anything like that. And we will encourage that certain plans and developments be made out there that would benefit those MROs and aircraft assembly operations that may be looking around. So what are our challenges from 2014 and beyond? The major challenge for us, high costs to develop sites due to steep topography and rock. We experienced this even with our Paulding Commerce Park site. It's so funny, we had a prospect that was through a consultant, and the consultant had brought the prospect with them. And when I completed the RFP for the project, I was asked, well, what's the topography like? Is it flat? No. Is it, describe it? It's gently rolling. So, yeah, we stretched it a little bit on that. I wouldn't call it gently rolling. It's a little steeper than that. But the point is, when the prospect got out and visited the park with the consultant, they loved the site. So everything was good. But these are issues that, with that topography, we have to address. And we have to address them, especially if they're county-owned sites. Making these sites, which is the next bullet down, pad ready means doing some grading out there and making sure that when they come in, they're not looking at mountains, they're looking at something that it looks to be roughly graded and a little bit level. So we're working on that with the IBA to try to reduce the risk to prospective businesses. We have a very limited and expensive inventory of industrial sites that the private sector has in Paulding County. And just real quick, I remember when I first got here and I was trying to identify private properties that would be attractive for business. I'm not going to mention the location, but the location was on a two-lane road. It was about 2 miles from the nearest sewer line, and it was a nice-sized property, and it had a real estate sign out front. And the property could be conducive down the road for a light industrial location. And I met with the broker out at the site, and I asked him, I told him what I was looking to do to assemble these properties since I was new, and what was the asking price on the property. The asking price on that property was $120,000 an acre. I can't market $120,000 an acre properties to an industry. I'm competing with sites all over the state of Georgia that are $30,000 and $40,000 an acre or less. It makes it extremely difficult. So we need to find expand that inventory of sites, and that is why the IBA has gotten involved in acquiring property, especially when it's bank owned, because it's attractive and it makes sense. And there are very few industrial buildings. I have probably 3 or 4 buildings that I can actually market to industry. They're all generally around 20,000 square feet. Some have loading docks, some don't. That's the challenge. Finding buildings in Paulding County with loading facilities, loading docks that can accommodate manufacturing, extremely tough. They all have drive-in doors, but they don't have loading docks. So what are the opportunities for Paulding? Many. We have now established a reputation that this is a great place for business, so the projects are coming our way. If we can figure out how to address some of the site issues, we will be in very, very good shape, because that's going to be our challenge. We can get them here, but we have to have the sites that will work for them. We're trusted by our economic development allies. They all believe in the message that Paulding County has put out there, and we tell them, look, we can't promise you that everything we do is going to go smoothly. Nothing works that way. But if there is a bump in the road, we're going to fix it, and we're going to take care of it. And you can talk to the companies we've worked with, because not every project went smoothly, and it really didn't always go smoothly. But we fixed whatever problems came up, and that's what the companies appreciate, that they have a partner that will help them when issues arise. We have a manufacturing campus in the Paulding Commerce Park that is now conducive for the types of industries we're trying to bring in, and Interroll has certainly elevated Paulding's presence on the global scene. And then finally, the business activity is extremely strong, and it is growing on a daily basis. And I'm not going to go through all this, but these are what we tell and share with prospects of why they need to be in Paulding County. The number one issue for any business is workforce. You're only as good as your employees. And here we have a tremendous workforce. We have taken prospects through to meet with our existing manufacturers, and the story that our existing manufacturers are telling is a very strong and positive one. That goes a long way, especially when we don't have a lot of industry here, but the ones that we do are showing how successful they can be. So we kind of jump down to one of the other bullets on there. It allows a company that's coming in to be a big fish in a very small pond right now, but we say that pond is going to be expanding greatly over the next several years. But we're seeing that that interest. And then the strategic location in Metro Atlanta, along with our incentives, our water and sewer, and easy access to customers, makes this location quite appealing. We're the undeveloped area in Metro Atlanta, and companies are starting to recognize that. And the other thing is we do convey to companies, and David Austin told me I stole this from Hardy Chevrolet, but I know I didn't. He said, we want your business and care about its success. That's true. I mean, that's what you want your customers to understand and recognize, that you're here to help them any way you can to make their business more successful and profitable. So we've created a new website. If you get a chance, go to develoment.org. It just launched a few weeks ago, and we're very active on our Facebook site in terms of putting up information of what's going on here. We even post jobs there. When Interroll's looking to hire a Rocky or Certified DEF, you'll find those job listings up there as well. So I thank you all, and I know we're running very, very short on time, and I told you I couldn't keep it brief, but I'll take any questions you all might have.
Tell you what, I'm sure Jamie will stay around a little bit afterwards. If you got a question, you come up to, we're running a little bit long, so we'll, thank Jamie.